This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking about the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the new movie in theaters. We're talking about going to the movie theaters, and we're going to talk about MLB Blackouts and how they still, after all these years, plague the league. Let's go. Let's hit it.
I'm going to tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona. It was like Noah's Ark.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Powell Not Found podcast for the week of May 18th, 2024. And this is episode 20. I never thought we'd get there, so I figured, yeah, thank you. Add a little bit of applause to the show. Welcome to the show. Thank you guys for listening. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts or on the YouTube channel at YouTube at Powell Not Found. We got a pretty good show for you today. We're going to be talking about the movie I saw last week in theaters, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, another extension of that rebooted movie franchise from 1968. It's a good flick. I came away with some pretty positive feelings about the movie. A little confused sometimes about where it's going, but felt pretty good as far as going to a movie theater and seeing a good flick these days, especially post-pandemic. I felt like I had a pretty good experience coming out of that one. So that one was very, very pleasant. We're also going to be talking about going to the movie theaters, which I feel like my thoughts on that are starting to coalesce. And unfortunately, it's getting bleaker and bleaker each time. And then we'll wrap up with the MLB. But I wanted to start off the show kind of talking about, before we get into Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I wanted to talk about what I was doing this year that kind of manifested in this podcast. So in 2024, I told myself in the beginning of the year that I was going to do something that was going to be habit forming, right? That was like my goal this year. And the podcast kind of came of that. Like, what better to start a habit than a weekly episodic show that can help you stick to your guns a little bit more, right? And as I started doing this podcast, I started realizing that once a week is, it's not that difficult, right? To schedule something into your life that takes, I guess collectively 4 or 5 hours or something to get everything ready and everything posted. So I decided to try to add a new thing to my life in 2024. And that was group fitness, right? The group fitness classes. And that was something I had tried to do in the past, but also I felt like I needed to branch out, get a little bit of exercise in my life. And plus, I love food. And what better way to eat more food than to exercise so you have the room for more food? I know it's not exactly the most healthy way to go about exercise, but my gosh, if someone told me a long time ago that you could eat more by exercising, I would have exercised a long time ago. No one just put it that way. It's like, hey, you can have an extra side of mashed potatoes if you just do 10 push-ups. I would have been on the floor so fast. So most of my life, I've been kind of struggling a little bit, dealing with weight, as everyone in the country is. And in 2020, when the pandemic started, I had that itch again, and for the first time of like, let's join a group fitness class. And there were a lot of them out there. There's that you probably know by name, and I decided to try out the Orange Theory, right? And again, I'm just talking about this free will. There's nothing behind this or anything like that. Just talking about this, my experience with it. And I went to one of their classes, and it was great in 2020. It was really good. I really liked the whole idea of like the rower. I can't put a rower into my apartment. I have no room. I liked the dividing into 3 subsections. I liked the whole format of of going to the fitness class, right? And and so in 2020, I came out of there. I was feeling energized. I was like, this is going to be a new me. It's going to be amazing. And the next time I went to a class, and I don't know if it was a themed class or if it was a little bit more intense, I remember doing the exercise on the rower. I remember going to doing some strength stuff, and I was either pushing too hard or I just couldn't keep up at the time because I wasn't as fit, if you will, or I just didn't know how to pace myself. This was not the instructor's fault. It wasn't the class's fault. It wasn't the company's fault. It was my fault. I pushed myself too hard over the edge. That I remember telling the instructor, I'm like, I have to leave the class because I think I'm going to die. And he said, why don't you just take a breath, take a breather? And I said, no, I need to leave. I think I'm going to die. Right? And I remember walking outside feeling dazed and stuff. And I felt really bad because in 2020, I never went back. I didn't sign up. I deactivated my membership, and I felt really, ashamed. And I always looked at that, the Orange Theory sign with a little bit of, regret in the back of my mind because I just completely bottomed out because I didn't do it the right way. So the reason I'm saying this is flash forward to 2024 now. I decide, hey, you know what? I want to try it again. I have unfinished business here. I want to be able to go and look at that sign again and not constantly be reminded of that experience where I thought the end of my life was near and I was going to go out in a blaze of orange. They could see, my heartbeat monitor as I passed out. But I went in there, signed up for the thing, took a class, and was overjoyed that I could do it. And since then, I have been to 5 or 6 classes, and I'm happy to report they've been great. They have made me feel incredibly better. I feel like my posture is better. I feel like the feeling I get, the fact that like I eat without guilt now, it's a great feeling. So really, I'm not trying to make a commercial for them. I'm just trying to tell you my overall thought. I like being told how to how to exercise, right? And I think that's what most gyms were missing, is that instruction that if you're completely a bumbling fool, as I am, when you go into the gym, you don't know how hard to push, you don't know how long to pedal for. I would go into the gym and I'd be on the elliptical for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes on like pressure 9, and then realize my legs are going to fall off or eventually melt into the pedal. And then I'd be like, I'm done. I'm good. I didn't think that was a good training plan. Weights, completely lost. No one told me how many reps, when to stop. And with running, in general, like on the treadmill or even running outside, I remember asking people on Instagram, when you run outside, when does your heart not feel like it's going to explode? Like, when does that feeling get replaced by the mysterious runner's high that everyone gets? That's what I want. I just wanted little instruction. And I think the fact that this is short, they're sweet, they're like, essentially drop-in classes with the membership. You can go in there. It's great. It's made me feel better. But also it's facilitated, and again, this is not a healthy way to look at it, but it's facilitated me going to a movie theater and eating some popcorn and not feeling guilty. And that's where I'm going to segue into my first subject of the day. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So I did see Planet of the Apes this Mother's Day, and it was a good movie. It was one of the movies that I feel like I walked out of a movie theater thoroughly enjoying, because there wasn't really much excitement kind of tied to it. This installment has been long in the making, right? The first one, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, came out in 2011, starring James Franco and Oscar Isaac, I think, played Caesar, and kind of rebooted the franchise from basically it being dead for about 10 years. Since the 1968 original movie that I think had 4 sequels to it. There was a kind of a failed reboot in 2001 by Fox, starring Mark Wahlberg, that didn't really go anywhere, and then they stopped for about 10 years and then rebooted this one. And I love that first movie. And again, I know we've talked about this with other films, but an origin story is always going to be the most interesting story to watch, right? And that's what Rise of the Planet of the Apes is, right? This one, as I went into the theater and watched it, it became unclear to me, because it's been so long in between installments, whether I had actually seen the second or third one. The second one being Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and the third one being War of the Planet of the Apes. And there's a couple things working against these movies. One is the titling. If you're not familiar with Planet of the Apes always kind of has this weird sequel title theme going on. There's Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Return to the Planet of the Apes. They always have like the Planet of the Apes within the title, and they just keep on, adding something to the top of it, right? That makes it very confusing to remember, to have it solidify in your mind that you've seen it. And people do get on creatives for essentially creating like numerical sequels. Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, Toy Story 4. That's not very creative. But at least it helps you kind of remember that you've seen the second one, right? It's not, Toy Story Woody's Revenge, right? You're not thinking, you're like, is that the third one? Is that the second one? Right? You've seen Toy Story 2. You've seen Toy Story 3. Something about this title, especially considering they're so close, right, makes you forget that you've seen them. Because I remember even at the time when Rise and Dawn came out, or they were sequentially when they came out, people were even confused why Dawn. The second one was named Dawn, and the first one was named Rise, because if you think about the origin of something, it's usually at its dawn, and then when it grows up, it's the rise of it. And so their titling was even a little bit skewed, even in the first 2 movies of the reboot. So again, right, it just makes it harder for you to remember, if you've seen these movies or not, right? They're not exactly like killer plots, right, in terms of, or very sophisticated plots. Like, you can pretty much pick up where you've left off, as I did. I'd not seen the third one, and I had an enjoyable time seeing the fourth one. But they might want to do themselves a favor and change the naming scheme, because even, let me just pull up this Wikipedia article here. The original series titles, right? And if you didn't know, right, there's Planet of the Apes, the first movie, in 1968. Beneath the Planet of the Apes in 1970. Escape from the Planet of the Apes in 1971. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes in 1972. Battle for the Planet of the Apes of 1973. The television series Return to the Planet of the Apes. And now there's Rise, Dawn, War, and Kingdom. I mean, there might be an opportunity here to kind of mix it up a little bit, because this naming convention is getting a little old, right? That said, the second reason I think that I had a hard time remembering if I'd actually seen any of the previous installments was, there's been a pretty big gap between the third one and the fourth one, due to the, I'm assuming writer's strike and pandemic and all that kind of stuff, shutting down production. There's been big delays of prominent series, right? Even HBO, Conan Must Go was delayed of its release. Euphoria, their television series, has been delayed, also due to the writer's strike. Everything has been delayed due to the writer's strike and the pandemic. But there was a pretty big gap between those things. But also the plots of these movies inherently, with the exception of the first one, is it fair? And I'm asking myself, I guess, a rhetorical question here, but is it fair to assume that the plot doesn't exactly move staggeringly forward a lot, right, between movies? It seems like there's this, it always is, the apes are rising to power, the humans are struggling to coexist, eventually they take over, right? But there's not really like a back and forth. It feels like you're watching a television series that puts out an episode once every 3 years, and it's just pushing the plot just enough to keep your interest. And that's what Kingdom kind of felt like a little bit. Again, haven't seen the third one, so I have to kind of go back and watch it. They do a little bit of a recap of kind of what happens. If you don't know, spoiler alert, Caesar dies in the third one, I guess. And so this one is pushing the timeline generations forward. In a way, creating another origin story for a new set of apes, right? This is so weird to kind of talk about this seriously. But this is essentially kind of pushing away from the previous three, which centered around the main character Caesar, and kind of introducing you to a new cast of characters, setting up essentially kind of the same story, right? This eternal struggle to coexist between ape and man, right? That being said, the movie does a good job. You do get attached to certain characters. It is interesting how they deal with, they don't totally ignore the legacy, how the legacy of the previous three movies are intertwined pretty well. A lot of these characters that we've all watched in the first couple, and those of you who have watched the third movie have watched that character. Now you're seeing their legacy misinterpreted or spoken correctly. It's interesting to see that kind of lineage kind of weave its way through the film. But at the end of the day, you're watching a movie that essentially is the same kind of plot device. It's a thriller. You meet a new kind of central ape character, his family, how they've developed, and somebody comes in, ruins the party, and becomes the antagonist. And you're watching a good flick. It's not all that complicated. The way that they kind of portray the main characters are engaging. I don't think that they're exactly like memorable by any stretch of the means. The human quest within that movie is very, very shallow, and I don't quite understand what their mission is. It just seems very on the surface level, like, hey, we'll figure it out in the next movie. But it's a good summer movie. There hasn't been a lot of standout movies this summer, as with the exception of like the rom-com that Anyone But You that was pretty big in theaters. So it's like, why not see this? Right now you're up against a pretty weak lineup of films. I guess Dune was really popular as well, but I mean, If seemed to kind of fall flat. I mean, The Fall Guy. You don't see many people talking about these movies, so why not go see it? Because it's going to be a fun flick. It's a good summer movie, and it keeps your interest, right? And you don't have to watch the first three films, which is always a little bit of a problem with these films that have sequelitis, if you will, right? It's like, do we have to watch like 6 hours of backstory to understand this one? Not really. It's truly kind of a reboot within a reboot. So if you look at it from that way, performances are great. The plot doesn't really move that much in the movie at all. But so just be prepared to have your concessions ready to munch on as the story gets a little bit slower. And so yeah, let me know what you think about the movie down below in the comments, and And if you like the movie, again, that's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Wes Ball, that just came out in theaters just recently, and seemed to be doing pretty well box office wise. Going to the movie theater in general, though, I think that's something that I need to address. And this is the first movie I've seen since Jason Statham's The Beekeeper, which should show you that it's not exactly top of mind, right? When I'm thinking about big theatrical releases. A couple weeks ago, last week, we talked about Unfrosted, right, coming out on Netflix with Jerry Seinfeld. There's been more. The Roast of Tom Brady was also Netflix. Let It Be was Disney Plus. Like, so many of these big theatrical releases are not coming out in theaters, right? And if you think about the difference and how much animosity there was in 2020 and 2021 when some of the big motion pictures were saying, why are we even doing this? It doesn't seem like you're going to capture a big enough audience. The box office doesn't seem like that big of a take. And to be fair, when I saw Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, there wasn't that many people in the theater, right? That truly, filled it up, right? It was one of the reasons that it was actually quite enjoyable to go. When I saw Madam Web a long time ago, there weren't that many people in the theater. I was actually surprised at how bleak the showing was. And that one was at night, right? It was just an empty theater, right? As these streaming services get bigger and bigger and bigger, there's less reason to go out to a movie theater, right? And I would argue that the only reason I enjoyed myself in the theater this time was, one, because it felt like a novelty now. That probably didn't when I was younger. If you wanted to go see a movie that was out, you could probably go see a movie. But now there's expense that gets incurred. I'm a little bit less, unless it's like the Alamo Theater or some sort of like Eden Theater kind of thing, I'm less inclined to kind of go for the food, because you're going to get, I feel like across the board, Regal, AMC, you're going to get kind of like the same tasting type of food. And to me, even when I was a kid, like, you'd have to be a brave soul to get the, movie theater hot dog. I mean, that person should get a Medal of Honor for even trying that. I mean, that the concession is bad when half of the people in the movie theater turn their heads from the screen to watch the guy who ordered the movie theater hot dog. I mean, I don't know where that thing is cooked. I don't see anybody boiling any hot dogs in the back of the concession stand. But somehow, when I was a kid, the concession hot dog was still on the menu, ready to order at any time. I've never been a person who ever thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go to the movie and I'm going to have myself a little bit of a barbecue in the third row by ordering a couple dogs. Never. In fact, I don't even do it at baseball parks, and that's the customary place to have a hot dog. But the movie theater? I mean, the smell alone should have driven out at least 3 rows from where the person eating the movie theater hot dog is. Just a disgusting premise. But again, there's less. Where was I? There was less impetus to go to a movie theater now more than ever. I think people have their home theaters at home, right? And it's not much different when you have like a 75-inch television at home. What are you really gaining, right? Because you can sit at your home, you can watch your on-demand movie, and not be disturbed by like the 6 other people who are in the theater who are looking at their phones, emanating a glow from their hands that is ruining the effect. And when I went to go see this Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, we were in a theater, and the screen was kind of broken. It was wet on the top left-hand corner, right? It was like it's like we're starting to see now the atrophy of theaters happen before our eyes. Kind of like when you see your apartment kind of go downhill after about 5 years because they've changed management. over and over and over again. And it's like once it used to be a beautifully painted hallway, and now all of a sudden you're starting to see the scuff marks. You're like, were they always there? And I just didn't notice. You're like, oh, this these doors kind of creak. I thought, they used to oil them up. That's what we're seeing with the movie theaters. We're just seeing the atrophy of these places because they're no longer popular, right? Why would I go out and spend an exorbitant amount of money if I can just do it from home, right? I feel like there's just less and less reason to go to a movie theater out or just wait for it until it gets on demand. You're going to have a better experience. You're going to have better food. And I used to think that Alamo and places like that, and I'm just using Alamo as the example, right? But I know there are other eat-in theaters now. There's the Look Theater. I think it's from Texas or something like that. But there are other ones that have popped up. And they've tried to make it more of an experience when you go. They're serving you food. And even those ones have started to kind of like lose their appeal. There used to be a place in New Hampshire where I was for a long time called Chunky's. I think that did that. They brought you food and you watched a movie alongside of it in like old car seats, right? At least you got to give it to that place for trying to mix up the environment and the setting in which you watch a movie, right? That was probably a little bit ahead of its time. But now even the theaters that were trying to make it different from a customary movie experience have started to kind of morph into the same thing, right? The AMC is the biggest culprit of this, where they have the reclining seats that you can lay down and watch a movie. Now, it might just be me, but I have a hard time getting comfortable watching a show if there's someone laying down next to me as if he's watching it from his bed. And I can't get over it. Like, the amount of recline in these seats is too much. They need to bring it back. It's like they took the airplane seat that could kind of recline and decided to just say, you know what, screw it, we're going to go all the way back, right? Those seats in movie theaters make me kind of not want to go because I don't want to be next to someone who's laying down. I want to watch it as if I'm like at a movie premiere, right? Like, we're all focused on this movie. There's not going to be cell phones, or as if I'm going to a Broadway show. And I'm not sure about Broadway shows now because they may have changed their protocol. But if you took out your phone in a Broadway show, there'd be an usher in your face. And I know that's not going to happen with normal movie theaters. I know that's not going to be the case. I know you're not going to have some 16-year-old acting like the enforcement in the middle of a movie that costs $19. But I wish that there was a place that you could do that. And they are becoming few and far between. And why I'm bringing this up is because going to the movies used to be a very, very enjoyable experience to me. It used to be a place where I'm like, oh, I loved going, right? And I could kind of look past as a kid the sticky floors, the bad popcorn. But as I get older and when there's options literally sitting next to me in my home that I can watch a show as a enjoyable experience, and I can put the lights down low and I can kind of duplicate it, I find myself going, what's the point? Let me just watch something else. And it becomes more of a novelty. But I don't know. Let me tell me if I'm wrong, right? Tell me if my take on movie theaters just going downhill is wrong, because I'd love to know. I'd love to kind of see if anybody still still likes it, but I'd also like to see, like, what would you guys do to improve movie theaters in general? Because I feel like they need something else. They need another revolution, right? They don't just need beer and alcohol, which is like, I feel like the last little evolution where it's like, hey, now you can gonna order a Corona while watching a movie. That's great, but what else do you guys think it needs? Anyways, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the MLB talking about taking away blackout dates, which would be amazing. Coming up next on the break. So let me pull this up and boom. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the show. Again, this is the Powell Not Found podcast. You can get us on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube if you want to see the video version of the show. Let me wrap up real quick here. I don't want to go all the full hour today, but I did want to talk about a couple of these things. It's kind of a slower week. Next week's episode will be probably filmed a little bit ahead of time because it is Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully everybody's going to have a relaxing weekend and they'll travel, and hopefully everyone will have a good time. Hopefully you'll be able to catch up on some baseball. The Yankees just came off sweeping the Twins and heading into Chicago, where they're facing the worst team in the AL. So hopefully they're going to keep rolling. I think what's really interesting about the Yankees is that they're doing it at this pace without Garrett Cole. They're doing it without DJ. They're essentially doing it without Glaber hitting. And essentially on the backs of Soto and on the back of Judge, who is heated up, right? And one of the reasons that I can even do this is because I'm out of market. I can watch every single game with MLB.TV, right? And that's great. That's been amazing. And I lived in New York I lived in New Jersey, but worked in New York and stuff for 4 years. And one of the things that frustrated me to no end was the fact that I was less than 6 miles away from being near Yankee Stadium, and I couldn't watch a damn game on television because I had cut cable a long time ago. In fact, there is very little reason beyond sports, and one would argue with NFL Sunday Ticket and all that stuff, there's not much reason to even have cable at this point, unless you're really into watching that Star Wars Return of the Jedi marathon over and over and over again every holiday weekend. There's not much reason to have it anymore. So many of these things are available streaming, but there are those regional sports networks, and that everyone's very much used to. There's Masson, there's Bally, there's the Yes Network, right? There's SNY that hold on to in-market games. And this article from Evan Drellick, which is pretty interesting, is MLB is looking into nationalizing its media rights and why some clubs are pushing to end local TV deals. Now, he actually does a really good job spelling out why this probably won't happen, because there's too much money in things like big market teams. Like I would highly doubt that the Yankees would not push hard to say, no, we built the Yes Network. We're making money from the Yes Network. Everybody else can do that too, right? Why would we give over this lucrative deal to basically, divvy out all the funds that we make to smaller market teams, right? It's going to be that battle again. What I don't quite understand is that they need to address this at some point, because you're losing when you take, in a world that does not support cable anymore. And I think I'm accurate in saying that most people don't have cable because everything is becoming streaming. And everything is on a streaming app and all that kind of stuff. People are bundling apps together almost as if it's cable. And there are so many more games going on Apple. There's so many more games going on Prime, right? That it's cutting into these local networks just in general. Now, how many games? Probably not that many compared to the 162 that they're supposed to broadcast each year. But I would argue that if they're not available to the people who live within market without some sort of additional payment in cable, that you're going to lose fans. And it gets harder and harder to follow a team that you just don't have access to. And this might be hearkening to an older mindset that I have, but one of the reasons when I grew up in New England, part of watching the Red Sox was watching them locally, right? Before NESN even got involved, right? They were on television. And so you got to know the team that way. When NESN took over, you had to have cable to watch it. And then you lose those fans that are probably going to be most invested in you, right? Now, there's no going back to putting them on local, over-the-air channels. I think that era is completely dead. But the fact that, I can pay Major League Baseball to provide me with MLB services and I can watch every out-of-market game, but I still can't get yes because of a licensing deal that hasn't been struck, seems a little bit strange to me, right? I don't see why they couldn't potentially strike a deal with some of these in-market teams going, hey, we're going to pay you just as if, and I think Evan Drellick does touch on this. If I'm misquoting him, I apologize, but I think that that's what Apple's doing. They're licensing out these games to take over coverage, right, and paying these people to broadcast these games, right? So why they can't open that up and why they can't fix this frustrating issue stinks. And especially if you're sitting in a two-team market, right? In the D.C. area, there is the Washington Nationals and the Baltimore Orioles, which have been in a long-standing fight for broadcasting rights, which I think has gone on since the Nats have moved in 2005. And every single time the Yankees play Baltimore, which ends up being somewhere around 6 to 10 times a year. It used to be worse. I mean, it used to be 19 games, 19 to 20 games completely wiped out of watching them on television. So really you're paying for 142 games. If you're sitting in a two-team market, and I'm sure this happens with Texas as well, with the Houston Astros, or God forbid, if you live in California, who knows where those markets stop, right? But you can't watch it. If they play the Nats, you can't watch it, right? We're right here. We should be able to watch our teams. It's made me completely not invest in some of the local teams here, until I go to a game, and that's when I figure out who's playing for the team, because I'm not buying cable to watch especially mediocre teams. And in this case, Baltimore's great, but maybe I would be more excited about the local team if they had figured out this in-market rights problem that has been going on for years. It's a great article to think about what they can do, and Rob Manfred can say whatever boilerplate statement he wants to say about we're going to get this fixed, but until we actually do, it's still going to be hard on local fans to get into their team in a world where cable does not dominate anymore. And so, to me, if you want as much exposure to your audience as possible, you have to fix this issue. It is a stupid issue. I feel like I run into it when I'm even traveling, and I'm like, I can't even watch the local team because now my location from my phone is telling them I'm in the market that I want to watch. It's dumb. And frankly, it's been going on for such a long time that it's you should have fixed this years ago. I'm glad they're talking about it, but it's one of those things where I'm like, the minute I read the article, I was like, this seems like there's too much money attached now that it should have been probably addressed before some of these regional sports networks had taken off in such a grandiose way, because there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, right? So, anyways, I thought it was an interesting article. Go check that out. That's The Athletic with Evan Drellick's article of could MLB nationalize its media rights and why some clubs are pushing to end TV local deals. Interesting stuff to think about, and what a staggering change that would be if MLB could take everything in-house. I'm not quite sure if it would be a good thing either. So it's just interesting to think about. Anyways, with that said, we're going to go wrap up the show here. And again, I'll remind everybody, go subscribe to YouTube and go to Apple Podcasts and go help the show grow. We'll be back next week. We're going to record early so that we can kind of enjoy our Memorial Day weekend here. And again, guys, thank you for listening, and thank you for driving some of these views up on the show. I really do appreciate it. It's episode 20, and hopefully by episode 40, maybe then I'll be a good podcast host. Who knows? I'm just kidding. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.
Passive,